Welcome to our new series of midweek bite-sized Bible studies. In fact, this is week 4 of the Bible study series and is our last week. Where's the 4 weeks gone? The theme of this series of studies has been the people in the New Testament. Last week we studied the life of Zacchaeus, a man who was regarded as one of the worst because of his occupation as a tax collector. But Jesus reached out to him on a visit to Jericho and it changed his life. God is continuing to reach out to people today and continuing to change lives and reset hearts. Well, as I said, we've reached our final study in our mini-series, and the person in the New Testament we're studying today is Philip. Again, Philip is quite a well-known character in the Bible, but this week's study we're looking to get under the surface of Philip's life and look how his relationship with Jesus changed him. First of all, we just need to confirm which Philip it is that we're studying, because there is more than one Philip mentioned in the New Testament. The Philip that we're looking at today is Philip, who was one of the 12 disciples and one of the 12 apostles. We're not looking and studying Philip the evangelist, who was one of the 7 deacons mentioned in the book of Acts. Eusebius, an early historian, says that Philip was a married man and had several daughters. In the Bible, we don't really read much about Philip's background. In fact, pretty much all that we learn is that he's always listed with Bartholomew. But the Gospel of John and the early church do fill in some of the blanks and help us understand a little bit about who he was. We found out from previous studies that sometimes a person's name in the Bible can tell us something about their character. But in this instance, I'm not sure that helps. Philip, the name Philip, means lover of horses. So I'm not sure that that's particularly relevant to what we're studying today. But there we go. But what we do know from Philip's name is that, like Andrew, his name has Greek connections. So it's possible that Philip had some Greek links as well. And this is strengthened by the fact that Philip spoke up for the Greeks at the Passover. Interestingly, someone's described the typical characteristics of a Greek man as enthusiastic, hospitable, friendly, men of their word, positive, and ready to help out in any sticky situation. It's also been described as fun-loving, good-natured, family-orientated, and someone who's always there for you. Interestingly, a 4th century AD Jewish writer called Adamartis Judaeus writes, Greeks were moderately tall men, broader, with moderately firm flesh, light-skinned, with a medium-sized head, a strong neck, a slightly curly brown hair, a square face, that is, someone with a broad jaw, narrow lips, straight nose, liquid, glad, quick eyes full of light. Now, I don't know if those things help you imagine what Philip might have looked like, or what kind of character Philip was. I don't know whether he was typical of those sort of Greek men at that time, but maybe it helps you paint a mental picture of him. The New Testament lists all 12 apostles 4 times. Matthew 10, verse 2-4, Mark 3, 14-19, Luke 6, 13-16, and Acts 1, 13-16. While there are some variations in the order that the apostles appear and even the names they went by, Philip is listed in all of them. He's also clearly one of the 12 apostles in the Gospel of John, though John actually doesn't explicitly list them there. This means that Philip was one of the closest people to Jesus, and he spent about 3 years living with him, witnessing the miracles he performed and hearing his teachings. He saw numerous demonstrations of Jesus' divinity. One of the first things we learn about Philip in the Gospel of John is that, like Simon, Peter and Andrew, he comes from Bethsaida, which is a town by the Sea of Galilee. This might seem like a trivial detail, but later when Jesus and the disciples come to Jerusalem, some Greek men from Bethsaida want to see Jesus, and they come to Philip. They approach Philip, not one of the other disciples. So it's possible that they knew him personally, or perhaps he spoke Greek better than the other disciples did. Church tradition holds that Philip preached the gospel in Scythia, a region of Eurasia, Syria and Phrygia, which is Turkey. And according to church history, Philip laid down his life for Christ, possibly being stoned to death after reaching many with the gospel. It would also appear from John's account of the feeding of the 5,000 that Philip may have been in charge of supplies and food for the disciples, who was sort of their road manager. He was the kind of person who was practical and always thinking of the bottom line. So let's have a look at what the Bible tells us about Philip and his conversations with Jesus. Let's read John 1:43 to 45. The next day, Jesus decided to leave for Galilee. Finding Philip, he said to him, "Follow me." Philip, like Andrew and Peter, was from the town of Bethsaida. Philip found Nathanael and told him, "We found the one Moses wrote about the law and about whom the prophets also wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." Here we read about Philip's first meeting with Jesus. The Bible tells us that Jesus found Philip, or as another translation puts it, Jesus ran across Philip. We see here that where some of the other disciples were found by Jesus, where some of the other disciples actually found Jesus, they came to Jesus and found Jesus. Philip was the first disciple where Jesus actually found him. But consistently, like he did for Peter and Andrew, Jesus calls Philip in the same way. He says, "Come, follow me." Interestingly, the first thing that Philip did after Jesus called him to follow him was to find Nathanael and to tell him the good news, to tell him that he found the Messiah. It seems here really that Philip's excited. He feels he needs to share the good news with a friend. The other interesting part of Philip's conversation with Jesus is that Philip immediately recognises Jesus to be the one whom the Old Testament prophets had spoken about and written about. Philip had found the one that the scriptures for centuries have been telling them to anticipate. The great day has come. The Messiah is now in their midst. One of the next passages in the Bible where we read about Philip is in John 6, verse 5 to 7. It's a story of the feeding of the 5,000. This is what it says here. When Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming towards him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" He asked this only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. Philip answered him, "It would take more than half a year's wages to buy enough bread for each one to have a bite." So Jesus and his disciples had gone up the mountainside, and suddenly they saw thousands of people coming towards them, hungry to hear the words that Jesus had to say, but also physically hungry as well. It's interesting that Jesus asked Philip, how are they going to feed all these people, as a way of testing him. We see in the gospel, interestingly, how Jesus quite often tests his disciples. This will be one way of seeing how much they'd learned from him. For example, one evening after a very busy day, they got into a boat to cross the lake. Jesus was tired, so he went to the back of the boat where he could lie down on a pillow. Before long, the winds blew hard, the clouds grew black, and the waves became high, and soon their little boat was being tossed about in the grip of a severe storm. Some of the disciples, of course, had grown up on the lake. They were good sailors, but soon even they became frightened, for they could not manage the boat. It started filling with water, but still the Lord Jesus slept on, unconscious of the storm. Finally, the disciples came to him and wakened him. They said, "Master, Master, don't you care that we are in danger and may die?" Then Jesus stood up in the boat. He spoke to the wind and to the sea, saying, "Be still." He made the sea, he made the winds, and he had power over them. At once, we read, the winds died down, the waves quieted into little ripples, and there was a great calm. When everything was quiet and the boat was moving along gently again, Jesus said to his disciples, "Why were you afraid? Do you not yet have faith to trust me?" It was as if he was saying to them, "Couldn't you have trusted me to take care of you? Don't you understand that I am the Son of God with all power?" And there are other examples where Jesus tests his disciples too. In Philip's case, his answer to Jesus does reveal something to us of his character. He obviously was a down-to-earth, practical man who took things at face value. Do you ever feel that God is testing you? In the story of the feeding of the 5,000, Jesus tests Philip's faith, and he didn't do very well, did he? His answer to Jesus is very down-to-earth, and it doesn't show any trust in the one who had demonstrated them over and over again that he could perform miracles. God does sometimes test our faith too, in different ways. We too may have faced testing but not understood what Jesus was doing. Why does Jesus test our faith? Well, James 1 verse 3 tells us, "For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow." Testing enables us to grow spiritually. So Philip failed his test of faith. What about you? What would you have said to Jesus in this situation? The next passage I want to look at is John chapter 14. And it says there, "Jesus answered, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you really knew me, you would know my Father as well. From now on, you do know him and have seen him." Philip said, "Lord, show us the Father, and that will be enough for us." Jesus answered, "Don't you know me, Philip, even after I have been among you for such a long time? Anyone who has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, 'Show us the Father'? Don't you believe that I am in the Father and the Father is in me? The words I say to you are not just my own. Rather, it is the Father living in me who is doing his work." Here we see Philip's part of a conversation that the disciples were having with Jesus about Jesus' relationship with God the Father. In John 14, Jesus is explaining some really important truths to the disciples. His statement in this chapter is a promise, a word of comfort to these disciples. Jesus is saying he is all they need. There is no need to panic, no need to search deliberately or desperately for a secret map. Jesus says, "If you know me, you will know my Father also." The conditional phrase in Greek is a condition of fact, meaning that the condition is understood to be true. So there can be no misunderstanding. And Jesus adds, "From now on, you know him and have seen him." We see in this passage that Philip's not quite convinced. And he replies to Jesus, "Lord, show us the Father and we will be satisfied." And then Jesus' response, we see, contains a hint of exasperation. He says, "Have I been with you all this time, Philip, and you still do not know me? Whoever has seen me has seen the Father." Interestingly, this is the whole of Jesus' mission, to make known the Father, to reveal who God is. Jesus has come from the Father in heaven and is now going to return there. And that's the fullest revelation of the person and the character of God. If we want to know who God is, We need to look no further than Jesus. All the words that Jesus has spoken, all the works he has done, come from God and show us who God is. Jesus was a little disappointed that Philip hadn't grasped this truth, even though he'd followed him and listened to his teaching for some time. Here is an important point for us too, because sometimes we can be like Philip in the way we see Jesus. Our view and perspective of him can be limited because we don't fully know and fully understand who he is. Like Philip, we too need to fully know Jesus and to realise that Jesus is demonstrating, is showing us God in his words and the way that he acts, and that will change our lives too. Someone wrote, in order for us to follow Jesus, we also need to know who he is. If we think about it, this concept is true in any relationship. When we're considering dating or marrying or going into business with someone, naturally, we first want to know who that someone is as a person. I've also always believed that any genuine relationship begins with an accurate view of the other person, and the same is true with following Jesus. While it's true that not much has been written about Philip in the Bible, you can still glean some important lessons from his life. I hope that we just don't learn those lessons, we also apply them to our lives as well. So thank you for listening. We're going to have a short break now, and then we'll meet up for a Zoom discussion about the study at 8 o'clock. See you later.